Hello, everyone. Last month, our community lost one of our most beloved members. Bill Pelter was a lifelong advocate for the civil rights of people with disabilities in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was wise, passionate, and tireless in his advocacy. He was also my friend. In recent years, he spoke frequently about how an aging society meant that many family members are aging out of their ability to care for loved ones who rely on their support and whom they have supported their whole lives. I had the immense privilege to interview Bill for this podcast in 2021. It was a great discussion, and I wanted to share it with you again. Please enjoy the conversation, and please consider Bill's wise words. Today, I have the great pleasure of meeting with my friend Bill Pelter. Bill has been a disability advocate for more than 40 years in the Bay Area, and I've had the pleasure of knowing him for at least 15. And I wanted Bill to come on the show today to speak with us and share his wisdom after all these years in the community. We're going to talk about housing, we're going to talk about aging society, and I'm thrilled you're here, Bill. Thank you for making the time.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Stephen. It's a pleasure. And as you say, you and I have known each other for quite some time. I feel like we should have a couple of cups of coffee on the table here, but we're doing it virtually.
Yes, that's the world, state of our world these days.
Right.
So perhaps we could start, Bill, with you sharing a little bit about your experience in disability advocacy over the years.
Oh, geez. Believe it or not, I'm going to have to go to elementary school to start off with. I was a young boy, probably 10 or 11, and I had made a good friend with another boy who actually had my same first name. So we were the two Bills, as we were called. And he had what was called back in the day lazy eye or strabismus, excuse me. And so when he would look at things, he would kind of waggle his head a little bit. And, people sometimes would pick on him and I would stand up for him. And at one point he stopped me and said, "Bill, you don't need to do that. Let's just have a good time. We're friends." And, but it really struck me at a very young age in just that was because he was a good guy. And it kind of opened my mind up to that as a very young boy that, we all just need to treat each other with kindness and let's have a good world together. So that's kind of where it all started, if you will. My career hasn't been a straight line. I come out of a family printing business. I grew up in the back of a print shop, my brother, sister, and myself in a trade family. And I'm very proud to say that the printing trades were very early in including people with disabilities in the trade. So that was a common sight. So again, maybe just fast forwarding, I did an internship. I worked in nonprofits for over 40 years, and I just find it to be very rewarding and important work. I think for the most part to have friends and colleagues with disabilities who are wonderful people to be around and to work.
So share with us a little bit about the last 20, 21, or 22 years at Bay Area Now, Ability Now Bay Area Rep.
Well, I really like you asking that question because even though I had all this time in the field, something magical happened to me at Ability Now Bay Area. And that was really being immersed in a day-to-day operations of a program that's educationally based for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, who I will say to anybody who asks me, who taught me to be a better human being. They are just lovely, beautiful people to work with, to be with. And I think the great life lesson they teach by example is to find joy in the present moment, enjoy the time that you have with people and so on. But was really an exciting opportunity because we're an educationally based day program, as I mentioned, and we have people that are on one end of the spectrum, non-readers, on the other end of the spectrum, going to community colleges and so on. And so we're providing services for people with a broad range of ability. And our one of our primary eligibility requirements is the desire to learn. And if you have a desire to learn, we're going to work with you. We're going to help you. We're going to be part of your learning process to accomplish what you want to accomplish in your life and your learning objectives. So we have an adapted computer learning center. We have probably the largest class of speech generating device users at our program. We have also, I'm very proud to say I was part of a team that developed the first self-employment program for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the East Bay.
That's wonderful. And it is an amazing legacy of work that Ability Now Bay Area has done and the contribution you've made to it. I know that none of what you've been talking about is specific to housing, but based on your experience, I know you've seen how housing challenges have impacted all the clients and consumers that you've worked with over the years. And I know that peripherally, some of the work that you've done touches on housing. And can you comment on that a little bit?
Well, I think here we're living in an amazing moment, if you will, if you want to categorize this last 5 years, if you will, with the advancement of assistive technology, really leveling the playing field for people with disabilities, not only in the workplace and the world, but also in housing. That housing is being made much more accessible through advances in technology. And also because of the changing demographics that we're in, meaning our aging society, this is only going to be more dynamic going forward. So let me give you four numbers here: one in four, two and five, 25%, and 75. Bill, what do you mean by that? Okay. The CDC came out with a report. One in four adults in the US has some form of disability. Within the one in four, two and five are seniors, 25%. 25% of the California population is going to be seniors by 2030. We're well on our way. In fact, at this point in time, there are more seniors than children in California. So, and I would add, what's the last number? 75. Why 75? The oldest baby boomers are turning 75 this year. And obviously that's going to continue going forward for the next 10 or so years. So we are in a major demographic shift in our society. And that's not just the US, that's around the world where there has been baby boom population. So this is going to be a transformational change in every system, including housing.
Wow. So there's a lot there, Bill. So let's chunk it down a bit and let's just start. I mean, I definitely want to talk about the impact on housing a lot with you. And I want to start though with what you said before that, how the last 5 years have been transformational. I think you said leveling the playing field. Can you give me an example of what you meant about how technology is leveling the playing field for people with disabilities and their families?
First of all, that before I say this, one of the big issues that you're going to hear or should be hearing is the digital divide. And we have to keep that on our radar. I know that at some point in this conversation, we're going to be talking about what people want to get involved in going forward to advocate for and so on. And that's access to technology, it's access to broadband and so on. But having said that, today we have technology that mitigates every form of disability. What do I mean by that? If there's something called locked in syndrome, which basically means the individual, because of a neurological issue, is down to eye blink for their communication. Today, that person can do everything you and I and anybody else can do on a computer with assistive technology. That's leveling. That means you could be working. That means you could be writing a book. That means you could be ordering a pizza. Everything you and I can do, they can do.
And
And go
and what
ahead.
are the implications of that for how they live in their homes?
Well, today you can automate your living environment. Like, for instance, I'm sure you've seen ads for people. Geez, I want to turn the heater on before I get home with my smartphone. So you can do that. So there's a big push to automate the living environment, irrespective of disability. So all of those technologies are Bluetooth accessible. So you can today, with assistive technology, utilize the power of that technology. And I would say It's not common knowledge, and I wish it was, that many of the technologies that we take for granted, like voice activation, was developed for the disability community. It comes out of our community. Additionally, texting. Texting originally was the original form of the TTY machine. So we, as a community, have been a beta market, if you will, for many of the technologies that people enjoy today.
So the upshot of it is that assistive technology and the advances in that area are making it such that people with disabilities can live in their spaces, whether they own them or rent them, wherever they're living in a community setting, they can live in them and overcome some of the challenges they might have had in the past around safety and control of their own environment.
Correct. All of this is environmental control. You can turn the lights on and off. You can turn the radio on and off. You can turn the TV on and off. You can change channels, all of that remotely. Now, you and I can say, well, geez, you can do that with a handheld remote. Yeah, you can. But if you don't have the physical dexterity to operate a handheld remote, how would you do it? You can even do it with a speech generating device. You can train the device by programming it to do those activities. There's a cross platform access that's available for people through the technology. So here, and you may have caught, I think it's 3 or 4 months ago, Apple had a big announcement on their new accessibility packages on their, not only their phones, but their laptops and so on. So, we're probably going to talk about this later in the conversation around aging, but getting back to the 2 and 5, two, and meaning we had 1 in 4 people in the country with a disability, 2 and 5 are seniors. So the senior population is growing. I think the technologies companies not only are trying to meet the need, but they see that as a market for their products going forward.
Wow. So before we leave the technology piece, you mentioned somebody who just has eye blink control
Right,
could manifest this control over their environment. Can you just
right.
share how that works very, very simply? Like what exactly is going on there that makes that possible?
Well, there are what are called sometimes called eye gaze readers. So basically, there's a light beam. Now, it's not a bright light shining your eyes, but it's a gentle beam, if you will, sign. So as you blink your eyes, it acts like a mouse click. So by using that, then you can go and you can do that's utilized even on a laptop. You can move the cursor around on the screen by moving your head. For instance, you can put a reflective dot on your forehead, little sticker, and you can just move that around. And just by moving your head, you can move the cursor, you can do a mouse click, change the page, do text input, so on.
Yeah, I think there's a general myth out in society at large, and even in some disability circles, about a perception around inability to be able to do such things as this, and a sense that people are, like you said, what do you call it, locked down or locked in,
Locked
and
in
it's
syndrome.
not. It's going to be an irrelevant non-issue. It sounds like as this technology evolves.
Well, I would agree, but I think it's actually broader than that, Stephen. Let's just put it on mainstream here. Main Street. The biggest issue that people with disabilities face with the general population is low expectations. That let's go back to me working at Ability Now. We had a community integration program in downtown Oakland, and I, when I first was on board, went down there, and we went on an outing, and I was pushing a wheelchair for somebody who was not independently mobile, who was a lovely person to be with, and we were going down the street, and people were passing us, and I was noticing that people were making eye contact with me or saying hi or giving me a nod, and they were completely ignoring the person that I was with. I was completely stunned by this. I thought, what is going on here? So I made it a point when the next person that did that, I said, hi, my name is Bill, and this is, I'll just call her Sue. That wasn't her name. Here's Sue. How are you? And so you could see that people were somehow dazzled by the wheelchair somehow, and maybe they didn't know what to say, or geez, I might do something wrong, or whatever it is. But you learn very quickly that there are attitudinal barriers that people have to face in addition to the physical barriers they have to deal with in the world or in a living environment.
I I could talk just about this little segment for you for hours, Bill, but do want to get into the other big issues you talked about, which was an aging society. So let's talk a little bit about that. How are you observing this to be a transformational change in our society?
Well, I want to say this. I know that you have listeners that are across the country and around the world. I'm going to speak from a California perspective with the belief that what I'm about to describe is true to a greater or lesser extent in their areas.
Fair
We are
enough.
very blessed in California to have a governor that has created the master plan for aging. Now, the master plan for aging, although named as such, is the master plan for aging for seniors and people and adults with disabilities. That mirrors the home and community based service funding that every state receives for seniors and people with disabilities. That's important. And so here, I think this is such a huge opportunity for the disability community. I want to get on top of the rooftop with a megaphone and say, folks, wake up. We got to jump on this like yesterday. And so here's what it is. We have to come to the realization, the disability community, caregivers, advocates, and so on, that our issues are senior issues. Senior issues are our issues. There is no difference, which means we are natural allies. What do I mean by that? What are the issues? Affordable and accessible housing, caregiving, transportation, equity in service provision, accommodations for all ages and all abilities. Now, the last one I just said, all ages and all abilities, is the motto for the master plan for aging for California. Here is the amazing piece that the California work group put together. They created something called the local playbook. The local playbook is intended for local jurisdictions, meaning counties, to pull stakeholders and service providers and county departments of agings and independent living centers together and work on the guidelines of the master plan for aging and tune it to their local area. That almost never happens in government. So let me break that down. What do I mean? You think affordable housing is important in your area, you need to be at the table advocating and working with others to make that a reality in your local jurisdiction. And who are the others? That issue is also an issue for seniors. They are our national allies. We are them, they are us. And that gives us a much bigger footprint than we would have individually. It's time for us to get out of our silos and to work together collaboratively. And that is another great outcome for the master plan on aging because it's looking at the entire network, the fabric of service provision and resources in the community to be fully address the needs of an aging society and a society that is comprised of people with disabilities.
So
So,
before you go any further, Bill,
yeah.
can we just sort of clarify what the problem is? Why is this so important that we have the master plan and that we look at this outside of a silo perspective? What's going on that is creating, especially in the area of housing, that is creating the urgency in your mind?
Well, it's multiple factors. As you well know, working in the Bay Area, the cost of housing is astronomical. And so that if that was the only issue, you and I could do an hour on that. So
Yes.
let us just for conversation's sake take that piece off the table because that's a whole other fabric that we would need to get into. I think the thing that's driving this is the an aging population, affordable housing, and that the need for accessibility in that housing is only going to continue to grow as the society grows. As I mentioned earlier in this conversation, 1 in 4 adults in the country have some form of disability, 25%. Okay. 2 in 5 of those are seniors. 25% of the California population is going to be seniors. So we are at a inflection point where every part of the country has got to step back, in my opinion, and take a look and say, how can we better serve not only seniors, but people with disabilities? Now, even if you weren't looking at the disability population, if you only looked at the senior population, if 2 in 5 of seniors have a disability, you're forced to look at the disability community. So you can't take that apart as the point I'm trying to make. So I think that we're at this inflection point that is it's such a huge opportunity to open up the scrolls, if you will, and say, how can we make this society more accessible? How can we make a society a structure, our community, so housing, the community, resources are more accessible for everyone in our community?
One of the things that you have shared with me that sort of brought this home for me is the issue of caregiving in the home and why this aging society and the whole issue of caregiving in the home is coming to this inflection point. Can you chat a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Stephen, because this is huge. You know, it's estimated, I think it's depending on what you look at, somewhere to be between 45 to 47 million unpaid family caregivers are out there in our country providing care to a loved one. Now, that may be a husband or wife that has, through the course of life, have gotten a disability or a health condition. It could be families who have somebody in their family with a lifelong disability. It could be a young person with a very involved disability and so on. But the fact of the matter is unpaid caregiving is a huge issue in our communities nationally. And that it's estimated that approximately, 60 to 65% of the caregiving is provided by women. And that means that they are sacrificing some part of their work life or all of their work life to be caregivers, excuse me, to be unpaid caregivers. That's huge. And so, again, the future of our country depends on a better support for caregiving across the board. So, and let me just say something about caregiving that's so important. In 2019, the AARP came out with a report that I really encourage everybody to look up on the net and take a look at. It's called Home Alone Revisited. It's a very simple report to get to. It's got a lot of graphics, so you're not going to be reading page after page of text, but it really makes this point. The older paradigm of caregiving was uncomplicated, it was informal, you know, feeding, toileting, and hygiene, and that was about it. Frankly, that has long since passed us, and we are in a much more involved paradigm where in the current healthcare environment, it's presumed every home is a potential hospital. Every service that a person needs can be provided unpaid by a family member with occasional visits by a primary therapist or nurse or physician. In the sum total of this, the full weight of not only caregiving, but care coordination is falling on the families unpaid,
And they're getting older.
and they're getting older. And I'm so glad you said that because many of the boomers are aging out of their ability to provide caregiving. I hope your listeners are aware that the oldest boomers are turning 75 this year.
Oh
And
my goodness.
that's going to continue every year for the next 14 years. We are in an aging society. There's no going back. And this is going to transform every aspect of our society. So let's get to housing. What do I mean by that? Okay, I got news for the nursing home industry. There is no way they're going to be able to institutionalize everybody the way that it has been in the past because you would bankrupt the country and the states if that were to happen. And so where's it going to go? It's going to go to community based care. What does community based care mean? That means in your home living environment, they are going to be providing care within the home living environment like they already are, but in a much underpaid for the family caregivers and service providers to provide that care, because there's no way you would bankrupt the country if you wanted to have everybody institutionalized the minute their independent living skills start to erode.
Wow. There's so much there, Bill, but I want to go back to one thing you said. You mentioned something about hospitals in the home. I want to say it wrong, but what were you talking about there?
What I'm talking about is many of the involved medical care that was provided in a hospital or skilled nursing is provided in the home living environment. So, and some of this is electrically dependent. And you may remember when the fires first started to hit, I think it was 2 years ago, the evacuation plans, they started to do power shutoffs and people were screaming to the high hills here. Wait a minute, what are you doing? You're shutting off our respirator. You're shutting off our different machines because there's medical equipment now in the home that never used to be in the home, but is now because of the way the insurance companies and medical facilities have pushed very involved medical care into the home living environment. So again, where this has been coming on for quite a long time, but I think now that the force of the demographics is really going to be pushing this change going forward. And as I said earlier, there's no way you're going to be able to institutionalize everybody the way it used to be because there's not enough money printed to be able to do it. So you're going to have to provide those services in a home living environment.
Right. That's where I wanted to go next. So is the plan on aging in this state going to address this issue particularly so that people can stay in their homes?
Yes. Yeah. But it's important for us to be on the local level involved. Wanting it is step one, but the most important step is doing it. Go show up at the meetings, get involved. And so, again, that's wherever you live. Get involved in the planning for aging because it's going to affect you. It's going to affect your family members. It's going to affect your neighbors and friends. It's going to affect people with disabilities who are not in their older years, but need these supports. So this is a huge opportunity. And I would say there has been siloing, as it's called, in the service sector. And I would go as far to say there's also siloing in the community sectors that, for instance, I've been very involved in disability services and also services with people intellectual and developmental disabilities. That particular subset has been very silent. It's time for us to open the door, get out of the silo, get to the meeting tables where these plans are being made and have our voices heard and to share our resources. All of those different groups have developed very unique things that can be shared and be a benefit to others.
So I admire your call to action. So for people who are listening in California, certainly, how can they get involved in this? And more broadly around the country, if there isn't a formal structure in place to address these issues, how should people engage?
Okay. Well, twofold. In California, you have the independent living center system, and they're throughout the state. You also have area agencies on agings, which are national, and that those look at various services on aging. Also, I would say that in California, it's a lot easier because this initiative has been launched, and you can find out very easily. You can call area agency on aging or California Department of Aging in Sacramento and find out, or look on their website and find out what the local area agency on aging is in your region and get involved. I think it's really a time for all hands on deck. That really, this is I couldn't say it more emphatically, Stephen. This is a huge transformational opportunity that we have to jump on. clear your calendar, get involved. It touches every aspect of life, including housing.
Thank you, Bill. And I couldn't agree more. And that's why I wanted to talk to you because of your passion and your expertise in this area. So are you optimistic about the
Yes,
future, Bill?
very much so. This is a huge opportunity. I hope I'm sounding optimistic,
It
but because I just think this
just
this
seems
is
daunting, right? It seems so daunting. This idea people are getting older, more and more stuff going into the house that they need to take care of their loved ones, and is society going to have the solutions, just at the highest level?
well, I would say yes. I would say emphatically yes to that for a couple of reasons. Let's start on the national level. Some listening to this presentation may remember that Joe Biden, when he was a candidate, put out a paper on aging and how important that was. And I've made the point earlier during my talk this morning how aging is an issue for the disability community and disability is an issue for the aging community, if you want to put it that way. It would have my head on the plate for calling them the aging. There it is. But for seniors. So here we are. And for people who can't see me, I have a gray beard and a bald head. So just so I feel like I'm allowed to say that. So, I think here there's a lot of opportunity besides of all the chatter that's around us. The issue is getting involved. We cannot let anything stand in our way because this is a transformational moment and your voice, your insight, your family's experience is so important in shaping what goes forward because we are in a transformational demographic change in our country. And I would go as far to say around the world. People are living longer, which means they're going to be needing services longer. They need more accessibility in their community and in their housing.
Well, Bill, I really wish, as I said before, that we had another hour or two or six. Thank you so much for coming on my show and talking about this.
Pleasure, Stephen. Great show and always fun to talk with you, man.